What's up, everyone? Jacob Burton here with my brother from another mother, Chef Sean Munshaw. And today we are celebrating the end of peach season. So one of my favorite stone fruits, I know one of Chef Sean's favorite stone fruits.
Definitely one of mine.
Is the peach. And we're blessed to have a farm not too far away from us called Twin Peaks Farms or Twin Peaks Orchard. And every year we get our peaches directly from them. They're a great producer out of the foothills where I grew up. And so today we got a couple of peach-inspired dishes for you. So you can go home this weekend, grab some peaches, and be inspired, make a couple of dishes.
Yep.
So we're going to do a peach tart for dessert. And to get the ball rolling, I'm going to demonstrate how to make the two separate doughs here real quick. And then we'll pass it over to Chef Sean to show us how he does his signature peach salad and a halibut taco with some peach salsa. And he's also going to show you how to make homemade tortillas.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
All right. I'm excited. Okay. So first things first, when making a peach tart, we're going to want to start with the dough. And I wanted to give you guys two separate approaches here. Chef, will you hand me the butter out of the freezer and the butter from the stove there?
Yep.
So this is just your basic, what you call a 3-2-1 pie dough. And the way that you treat the butter is going to actually change the texture. So it's a really fun example that you can eat on how the incorporation of fat into flour and the incorporation of fat into a dough will actually change its overall texture. So for those of you who have made actual pie crust before, you may be familiar with the 3-2-1 method. So I'm going to use a food processor here, and you could do this in a bowl. You kind of mix it together with your hands. But if you have a food processor, it's going to be a lot easier to incorporate it. And with the 3-2-1 dough, it's 3 parts flour by weight, 2 parts water, 2 parts butter, and 1 part cold water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the butter that we've cubed into the flour first and incorporate that just with some pulsing. All right. So we'll put this on here, give it a bit of just a couple of pulses. Now, for this specific dough, we keep the actual flat or the actual butter chilled because we want it to stay crumbly. And so it's these chunks of butter that are in this flour that are going to actually give us that flaky pie crust. So once we have that, kosher salt. All right, that's probably good, Sean. We can drop a pinch of kosher salt in here. You could add some sugar, but I prefer no sugar. And then we'll incorporate our water. So 100 grams of water that we'll be pulsing in. And that's going to bring our dough together into basically a crumbly mixture. Try and get that guy off here. So we'll go ahead and move this over to the marble. Spread it out. I'm just going to press this dough together. So at first, it's going to feel like it's a little bit too dry, but that's okay because you want just enough water to hold this dough together without overworking it. Now, if you add too much water, what's going to happen is you're going to have the cross-linking of gluten strands, which is going to form a gluten network, which is the same reason why no-knead doughs work, right? So if you do sourdough and you do a no-knead dough where you let it ferment or sit and hydrate for a long period of time over the course of hours, you're able to form a gluten structure without actually kneading it. So the same thing will happen if you allow the water, if you add too much water to this dough and then allow it to sit for too long, all right? So we want to make sure that we do not do that. Grab my crusty bench scraper here. And then we'll let this dough rest in the fridge for generally about 30 minutes. All right, so a little bit of plastic wrap. And that's to cool the butter back down. So that way, when we go to roll this pie crust out, the butter doesn't melt on us, right, and get too soft. Because again, if it gets soft, then it's not going to be flaky anymore. Now, if you want more of like a crumbly cookie texture, which I actually really enjoy for my fruit tarts, then another method, which you can easily just mix by hand, is again, you're using the exact same ratio. You're using the 3-2-1 approach. So 300 grams flour, 200 grams butter, 100 grams of water, plastic scraper. Plastic scraper. Just a rubber spat, I guess, is fine. Yeah. So again, we're going to incorporate the melted butter into the flour first. And this is going to coat the individual, well, not gluten strands, because gluten hasn't formed yet. So in the flour, you have two proteins, which is gluten and gliadin, and you need water to basically cross-link those proteins, water and mechanical mixing, right? So when you mechanically mix the gluten and gliadin together with some moisture, then they'll form gluten, which is your protein matrix that gives your bread the ability to rise, which is great when you're making bread, but not so great when you're making a pie dough or a pie crust. So by adding in the fat first, we're restricting their ability to cross-link together. All right? And once we have the fat added, we can come back, add in our water, a little bit at a time. And what you'll notice too is this dough, because the butter is melted, is at first going to seem a lot more loose and almost paste-like than our original 3-2-1, which had the hard frozen butter in it. But then when you allow this to rest in the fridge, it's going to get really firm. So when you go to roll this out, the actual pie crust itself, you can roll out pretty much straight from the fridge. Whereas this one, you want to actually let it fully come to room temperature for about 30 minutes. So go ahead and fold that water in. And again, you could easily use a food processor for this. You can use a stand mixer, whatever works best for you. Now, because this dough is kind of moist, after I incorporate everything, I will go ahead and just pull out the plastic wrap and then drop this dough directly onto the plastic, like so. Fold this over. Fold this over here, press it down, kind of create a square block, so that way it's easier to roll out a little bit later. And again, let this rest for about an hour in the fridge. Okay? Now, while that's resting, you'll want to prep your peaches. So for this particular pie crust or tart, I'm going to just cut around the pit, and you can see how ripe the pit is, or how ripe the peach is. The pit just drops right out, and it's also a freestone style peach, right? So you don't have that sticky stone in the middle. And then I'm just going to cut these into some thin slices. Now, along those same lines, When you're cooking with a seasonal ingredient, you're going to incorporate it into lots of different dishes, which is why we're showing you 3 separate dishes today. So Chef Sean, when he shows you his peach salsa, he's going to show you how we actually make the peach, or basically he's going to be starting with a diced peach. And the way that we do that is by cutting off the rounded sides, and then we'll cut some slabs. And you cut the slabs with the thickness that you want your dice to be. And then you come back and you dice it up. Now, that's going to leave you with some scraps, but obviously we don't throw these scraps away, right? These scraps are then turned into any number of fermentations. Sean, what were you doing the other day with the peach fermentation?
So we were doing just a quick lacto fermentation with the peach pits and all the scraps of the core, and we were just tossing them in 2% salt by weight of all the peach scraps, tossing them together, throwing it in a Ziploc bag, and letting it naturally ferment over 5 days. Then it starts to drain its juices, and then we strain those out through a chinois, and we just have like this nice like acidic water, similar to like a vinegar or lime juice if you were to use it.
Okay.
We'll be using that today in the salsa.
Yeah, lactic acid fermentation creates a really savory, almost umami flavor, which is a great addition, and also some acidity, right? So you can take those scraps, you can ferment them, and then in this case, we're just going to make a really simple gastrique, which is sugar and vinegar. So will you hand me your jar of sugar?
Oh, it's for you, chef.
Over here, thank you. So we'll just start over about medium-ish heat here in a dry pan, and we'll just throw enough sugar in the bottom of the pan and allow this to melt. And on top of that, we'll throw our peach pits, which have a really nice earthy flavor. If you want to add this dice to your mise. Sure. And we'll go ahead and toss this guy in here too. We'll make it a little extra peachy, right? And we'll set these guys aside for our peach tarts. So we'll let this guy get warmed up. Here, I got one more for you. And then I'm going to have Chef Sean kind of keep an eye on that for me while I show you how to roll the actual dough out for your tarts, which is pretty simple. All right, so here's our melted butter tart. Again, this is my preferred method. What's nice about this as well is you don't need a food processor. You can mix everything by hand, and you can see how firm this tart dough has become. And this has been sitting in our fridge for about 2 hours now. Now, I don't want to add a bunch of extra flour to the mix, but a little bit will be necessary. So I'll just throw down a slight dusting. We can always come back for more. And then sometimes if the dough is a little bit too stiff, you just got to tame it a little bit, right? Show it who's boss. And you can see how crumbly it is. But as it warms up, we'll be able to hold it together a little more cohesively. So ideally too, even though I took this dough out about a half hour ago, it would have been a little bit warmer. That's okay. So what Sean's doing here is he's just kind of moving that sugar around the pan, making sure it doesn't get too hot in one singular spot. And then once that sugar starts to melt and to brown, we're going to add in our sherry vinegar. And that's going to give us a nice sort of sweet and sour syrup known as a gastrique that we can then use later on. So I'm going to set this dough aside here for a second and let it temper just a little bit more. Will you go ahead and grab the pie crust for me?
Yep.
So sometimes when the dough's fighting back, you just got to let it sit for a second. In the meantime, we'll roll out our traditional 3-2-1 pie crust. And you can see the difference here is you have the speckled chunks of butter. So this will be a more flaky dough. So now that the sugar has caramelized and we have that peach flavor starting to infuse, Sean here is going to add in some sherry gastrique at about a 1-to-1 ratio of sugar to sherry. And that's going to give you your basic caramel texture. So you can see this pie crust here is much easier to work with. Needs less tempering. And all of these, if you cut this pie crust into like a circle or whatever shapes you want, you can rework the edges into more pies by just recombining it and rolling it out. Or you can also just bake them as is and crumble them on top for a little bit of an extra garnish. All right, so a couple different approaches here. You could use a bowl or a biscuit cutter to cut this into a round and kind of make more of a traditional round shaped tart. Or you can just shingle these guys and make a little bit of a square tart. Okay, kind of it's completely up to you. So for something like this, you could very easily just fan out your sliced peaches. You come and trim around. Split. And again, this can just be laid on a sheet tray. It can be brushed. It can be turned. You can deep fry it. There's lots of different stuff you can do with it, or you can just rework it. Then just take these guys here, roll up your edge. And then we'll brush this with a little bit of egg yolk, sprinkle it with some sugar, and pop it in the oven. Mackenzie, do we have any questions so far?
Someone would like to know if these dishes could be modded with nectarines.
If what?
The dishes could be modded using nectarines.
Yeah, absolutely. So any stone fruit would work great for this. So cherries, if you remove the pit, nectarines. You might want to change your flavor structure ever so slightly. A good resource that we talk about a lot in the podcast is the Flavor Bible. Please just spray that guy for me. Yep. So you take the Flavor Bible, you look up nectarines, you look up whatever stone fruit it is that you're using, and then you can start playing with some of the various flavors that they recommend if you're kind of looking for a jumping off point. So we'll go ahead and crimp these guys up. And Sean, when you get a second, if you wouldn't mind cracking just the egg yolk into here for me.
Yep.
And I really like these free-form tarts like this because you don't have to false bake the pie crust. They look kind of organic and rustic, and you can really easily fold them. And you can do this with any sort of fruit, so pears, apples, all of it works. Go and lift this guy up, stick it on our quarter sheet tray here. That goes on our quarter sheet tray there. All right, and then I'm going to add a splash of water. Nah, I'm just going to use a little. I'm going to go ahead and just add a little splash of water to the egg yolk. And so the egg yolk itself gives you that really nice sort of shiny pastry texture or color that I like. So it's that deep, rich, golden brown. And we're going to go ahead and just brush this along the edges of our pie crust. Now also too, you could easily, if you wanted to make this a little more advanced, you could do any number of pastry creams in the bottom layer and then put the peaches on top. So you could take even cream cheese with a little bit of egg yolk in there, cream cheese, sugar, lemon, egg yolk. You mix it in, you can use that as a base. But what we're going to do as well is Sean has some koji yogurt that he uses for his peach salad. I'm probably just going to steal some of that, sweeten it with some sugar, and then use that as the base when we go to actually plate this. All right, so to finish, we're going to hit it with just a little bit of seasoning. Don't forget the salt in your pastries, right? Salt's very important. It's going to really bring out the flavors and the sweet. And I'm also going to hit this with a little bit of sugar. This is sprinkled right on top. And we'll pop this in a 350-degree oven. And we'll bake it until it's done, which is basically just a nice light golden brown, probably about 15 to 20 minutes. All right. So Sean is going to go ahead and strain this guy for us while I pop this in the oven.
Yeah, you're really looking for to get really bubbly and almost like molassesy look, but real loose, if you can see that. And then as it sets, it'll set to the right.
Let's do this just so it cools a little bit faster.
Cool. Almost a frothy bubble.
All right, so now with this strain, we're going to go ahead and pop this into the fridge, let it cool, which is going to help it reach its final thickness. And then I'm going to roll this out while I pass it over to Sean. And Sean's going to show you his signature peach salad that's on our menu at the store right now, which is when I come with my family to eat, it's absolutely one of our favorite things to get. We usually get a couple of them for the table to share. So, Sean, why don't you go ahead and take it away with your peach salad?
Awesome. Cool. So when it comes to summertime, I get drastically excited about peaches and everything, and I really just like to
scoot down to camera one, probably.
I really just like to focus really on just a peach forward dish, and that's where we came up with this peach salad. It's grilled peaches. I think grilling peaches in the summertime brings out the flow of the flavors of peaches and just develops them more, caramelizes them up. So just a really nice hard grill on them, I think, really transforms the peach into even a more incredible dish. So here at the store, our peach salad is grilled Twin Peaks peaches, served with torn burrata, which is a classic pairing. We do a pine or a pistachio streusel. It's kind of like our crunch texture. Pistachios and peaches go really well together. So we decided that a savory streusel would be our best approach for a texture component. And then we serve it with a koji yogurt. So koji is a natural mold that grows on typically rice or any starches, barley, farro. And it's used in creating sake, miso. And then you take these spores and you add a 5% salt ratio to them, with water equal parts to the koji, and it creates a thing called shio koji. And it's a really developed thing to make. So we actually bring it in, and we use it for brining processes or reculturing processes. We mess with cheeses, all that stuff. So I thought it'd be really fun to take Greek yogurt and shio koji and inoculate that into the Greek yogurt and then reculture it. So now it creates a even more fortified, funky Greek yogurt flavor that I think pairs really well with the peaches. So first, we'll start off getting our streusel started. And then as we're making that, we got just a regular pan.
Yeah, you're looking for like
Just a regular saute pan.
Stainless steel.
Yeah.
I think that was the only one that I.
Cool. We can do it in this. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Still getting a little set up here in the R lab.
Yeah.
So as we do these live streams, we figure out what we forgot.
Right. So first we'll start with melting the butter. Then we're going to do as that butter melts, we'll start browning our pistachios in there. These are just pulsing the Roboku, kind of similar to what Chef Jacob just showed you. You can chop by hand. You can put them in between a paper or a towel and break them with a little meat tenderizer or a pan. We find that using the Roboku is the simplest and easiest way to do it. Just pulse them up real quick.
And Roboku, for those who don't know, is basically the brand name of the commercial version of a food processor.
So we'll let that melt.
And what's nice about this streusel too is you can make a batch. It's just a great crunch component for both savory and sweet dishes. So the idea is we show you how to make a couple different components, and that streusel will be just as home in that peach salad as it would be as a garnish on top of these tarts.
Yeah, it's really fun to play with the streusel. We just switch a couple spices. You switch the sugar, and like you go savory to sweet real quick. We find that, you know, the components that we put in this could be used for multiple, as you see with how we're going to intertwine the tart with the salad. So that butter melts, we'll just add our pistachios in there, get those browning. What's going to happen as it browns, the milk solids are going to start to brown the butter, and the water is going to separate, and then it's going to start to get nutty, and also too it's going to brown the pistachios up real nice and kind of really bring out their flavor even more than if they were just used raw. Brown, you probably want to go about, I don't know, 1 minute. We're not trying to really like super darken them up because we're also going to add sugar, and that's going to start kind of melting and coloring them up. So we're going to add some brown sugar. You can replace this with just regular granulated white sugar if you want at home. If you don't have brown sugar, it's not going to have as deep of a flavor, but it'll work just fine. Won't come out as dark.
Right behind you.
So we'll get the sugar melted, and then we'll let that come to a bubble, and then we'll throw in our final seasonings, and then get it all tied together with the flour.
All right, so since this tart dough with the melted butter had a little bit of a chance to come to room temperature, we were able to work it into a nice rectangular shape, crimp around the edges, and we'll do the exact same thing as our other tarts with the pie crust dough. Lay it on a sheet tray, we line with some parchment paper, hit with some nonstick spray, and then we'll brush it with our egg yolk for color and pop it in the oven.
Beautiful, chef. Cool. So in this streusel, classically cinnamon is used. Here at the shore, we decided to use Ras El Hanu, which translates into top shelf spices. It's used a lot in Indian cuisine. There's a lot of baking spice components in it, so I thought it'd be really fun to use for our savory streusel. It's going to kind of give you that same feel as a classic streusel with cinnamon, but a lot more savory components coming out on the back end, which makes it real fun with the peaches. Then we'll hit a little bit of salt in there. Let that Roselle Anew toast for a few seconds. Really going to amplify all those spices in it. And then we're just going to lightly fold in the flour. And you don't want to dump it all in there because you don't want it to clump. You want to be able to cook your flour out a little bit and be able to control the streusel. Always add flour in batches.
Right behind you. Man, and the smell on that is so good. As soon as you add that Roselle Anew, it just blows up the entire kitchen.
As soon as it starts getting a little tight, you want it to really start coming off the pan. And then the last batch of flour really clumped together, but that's good. That's when the streusel starts to transform into itself. So then you'll kind of brush it around as it gets all clumpy, and then you'll just kind of cook it for about 1 minute, kind of cook that flour out a little bit. As you can see, it's real dark. If you were to use that white sugar like I was talking about, it'd be a little bit lighter.
So both of these styles of tart dough or pie crust freeze really well. So you can pop these into your freezer and you can pull them out later on when you get in the mood to make another sort of tart or a pie, depending upon what you have. I'm going to go ahead and drop these right back down in the freezer here. Cool.
So what we're going to do is we're just going to take the streusel. We're going to put it on a little sheet pan. You can do it at a plate at home if you need to. That's all you got. And what we're going to do is we're just going to let it cool down. I'm going to dump this right here. And just let this sit for about half hour, 45 minutes, just out in the open. Let it cool down naturally. And it's going to harden up. It seems really soft at first, but it hardens up and then becomes crumbly and streusely, and then you can crumble it over the top. So we'll just put that to the side. So this is the streusel after it's sat for a while. As you can see, it's clumpy. It's all hard now. Has nice texture. So we use that for the salad.
Don't underestimate streusels and other sweet crumbles for that sweetness and to balance in your savory dishes. One of my favorite things ever, I did a citrus terrine.
Yep.
And we would do like a cayenne toffee that we'd crumble over the top. And it was absolutely delicious.
Yeah, you're just killing two birds with one stone, that savoriness and that sweetness. So this is the koji yogurt. So this has been sitting for about a week now. So we take the Greek yogurt and we add about 1% of shio koji to weight of Greek yogurt. And that gives it about enough of the koji itself to kind of start reactivating the culture of the Greek yogurt. So now it's really getting alive and it really starts to transform its flavor. So it becomes really nice and funky for the dish. So we'll just take a little bit of the koji yogurt. And here at the store, we just put it down on the side and we just do a quick swoosh around the plate. Now we kind of lay the base of how we're going to build our salad around it. Then we'll take some nice baby arugula. I just like to keep it fresh and dry. Make sure it's nice and crisp. This can be a good base for your peaches. And again, I don't dress or anything because I got enough other ingredients to kind of help break down the arugula as you mix the salad together. Then we'll take some grilled peaches. We already had these grilled prior to this. So we just quarter them just like you saw Chef Jacob do, and kind of flatten them out a little bit to give them more of a presentation point. And then just put them on a hot grill, nothing else. And they really soften up real nice. They caramelize naturally from the natural sugars in them. And then we'll kind of just lay those around in here, right on top of the arugula. We'll take some puat coulis, another stone fruit that we really like in the summertime. And we just do a classic dessert sauce out of this. A little bit of puats cooked down in some sugar and water, a little bit of salt, and we add some ground hibiscus to it to add a real in-depth back note of flavor, some floralness that really brings it to the next level. And then hibiscus is just a flower that you find in Mexican cuisine. Then we'll add a couple nice dots of coulis around. That's kind of creating your sauce now. Then we'll take some burrata, some fresh Di Stefano burrata, and then we'll just kind of lay it down in there, kind of wherever it fits in. It's not like a set spot for it. I always like to kind of put it next to the coulis, kind of help the flavors or the colors kind of pop. And then take some of that streusel, and don't be scared of the streusel. You want to make sure it covers the top of it. You want that crunch and that streusel to come through. Go with that. Then some fresh basil leaves. We just like to tuck in there. About 3 of them. Then just some nice molten sea salt. And there you have it. That's our classic showroom peach salad.
Get you guys a close-up shot of it here. And that's one of my all-time favorites for the summer.
Yeah, this one hurts that it's come to an end.
I know, but we have heirlooms right around the corner.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Any questions on the peach salad before we move on?
No peach salad questions, but there are some questions about the tart.
Okay, let's take the tart questions while Sean gets set up for the halibut tacos.
Oh.
There's a koji yogurt for you, chef.
Cool.
So there's one question about the peach salad now.
Okay.
It's a cheese stracciatella or burrata? Stracciatella? I don't know how to pronounce it.
What's the question?
What kind of cheese it is?
Yeah.
Ours is burrata, but you could use stracciatella if you need to. So it'll work just fine.
Stracciatella is
Yeah.
how you say that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So pretty much any soft cheese too, like you can replace it with feta or goat, whatever you really like. We just feel that the burrata adds like that nice, smooth milkiness to it that we're looking for.
Yeah, the burrata is nice from a flavor structure point of view. Because as Chef said, you have the smoothness and the creaminess, but it's also, it doesn't have a really strong flavor. And not to say that you can't put strong flavored cheeses with a stone fruit or with peaches, but it just changes the dimensions of the dish. So the peaches are more forward in a salad like this, because the burrata kind of blends into the background, adds a nice creaminess. It almost acts as a sauce versus like a crumbled feta or a harder cheese like aged like white cheddar. All would be nice. I mean, I would probably take the white cheddar and like shave it with my vegetable peeler and put it around, but do it sparingly, right? It's going to add a nice salty kick to it. But from a flavor structure point of view, it's just going to kind of change it. All right, what do we have on the tarts?
All right. What winter fruit would you like use in a tart like this?
So winter fruit, well, you have pears that are coming up. Pears and apples are coming up in the fall season. So that's what I would change this to. And you do the exact same thing where You don't have to cook the pears or anything. You can just slice them up, shingle them, crimp your tart around it. You can do just a really simple like creme anglaise, which is your basic, milk and egg yolk custard for the base. And you can go through all the seasons with this. You could even play around with, you could try citrus, but the citrus tends to have a lot of water in it, so it's probably not going to come out as well. But at this point, pears and apples are basically going to carry you all the way through till spring of next year, and then when it comes into springtime, then you start using your early spring berries like your strawberries and raspberries and things like that. Then June rolls around. The first stone fruits of the season are going to be your pluots and your apriums, which are kind of your hybrids, and then you go into peach season and rinse and repeat.
And then, could this tart also be called a peach galette, or is there a big difference?
Yep. Yeah. No. Actually, it's pretty much what I'm doing. Is it so? A galette is a free form tart. So yeah, it's technically a peach galette. So.
All right.
And then one more peach salad question. How would you describe how soft the peaches get after you grill them?
How soft do the peaches get when we grill them?
Yeah.
They still have like a slight texture to them, like a tooth and bite, but they get slightly soft. Depends on how ripe they are. We like to kind of control where they're still like a little firm, but like squishy to the touch, and then they just get like a nice, like smooth, like bite. So
yeah, even if they're ripe, they shouldn't be mushy when you grill them.
Yeah.
And when you add heat to fruit, it really helps to release the sugars and the juices. And we're serving it, immediately after grilling. So, all right, Sean, take it away with your fish tacos.
All right. Cool. So we're gonna have a couple things we're gonna need to get started first. So we're gonna do a beer battered halibut, Alaskan halibut fish taco with a peach pico de gallo, and we're gonna make some homemade white corn tortillas. So what I like to do first is get our masa started, because you want to let your masa sit and hydrate first, and then we'll start working all of our other stuff together. By the time that is, we'll be able to make our tortillas and get those grilled off. So,
and while you're mixing that, what exactly is masa?
So masa is the natural or the flour created from heirloom corn. So what you do in Mexico is there's a lot of different varietals of corn that grow, and they naturally have this clear like coating on the outside of them, and you have to nixtamalize that. So nixtamalizing is using a calcium or a lime water to soak that in there, or soak the corn in it, and then you're able to release that off the outside of the corn kernel, and then you're able to dry it out and grind and create masa. So what we have here is just the dried version of nixtamalized corn. It's a very labor-intensive process, but Hacienda out of LA, they do a great product, and it saves you a lot of steps.
Yeah, and Sean's been using Hacienda now for a few years.
Yeah, a long time.
They have a great product. So,
yeah, the hardest part about nixtamalizing corn is you need a molinado. Is the big lava stone, the water running through it to really get a nice grind on your corn kernels.
Yep.
And that's like the hand grinders, like you could use, they work, but it's to really do it right, you really need one of those big ones.
Cool.
So, cool. So this is white Tilo Blanco heirloom corn masa, and then I incorporated 1% salt to the weight of the masa. Masa flour is a little bit different than like AP flour or other stuff like that. It's mostly equal parts of liquid to make it actually hydrate your dough correctly.
Okay.
So then
equal by weight.
Yeah, equal by weight.
So for those breadheads out there, that would be 100% hydration.
Yes.
So equal amounts of flour and water.
Yeah. And then I like to just make sure that I like to add a little fat, also 1% to the weight of the masa. And I like that to be warm. You also want your water to be warm, also like room temperature. What that's going to do is going to help hydrate your dough better than cold water. Cold water will take longer. So we just have room temperature water right here. Also, I'm using butter. You can use any fat you want. You can use lard, which is typical, duck fat, bacon fat, whatever you got laying around, which is really cool. So I'll create like a well, kind of like you're making pasta at home. And then you kind of just fold it all together.
Yeah, for the pros in the audience, save your fats because this is a good time to use them. Your bacon fat from roasting off all of your bacon for your morning program. I have a video on rendering duck fat, which could just as easily be chicken fat. Also, we have I'll save the fat that I skim from my stocks, whether it be veal stock or chicken stock, and I show you how to at a low temp cook out the water and strain and basically clarify that fat. So you're left with the pure fat that you can mix in to these doughs or that you can use for cooking. So when you're pan roasting a chicken, right, or a duck, using chicken or duck fat or bacon fat is going to be a really, really great approach. It's going to build that flavor structure. As we know, fat is flavor. So if you can cook something in its own fat, even better.
100%.
Or bacon fat.
Yeah, or bacon fat.
Or bacon fat.
Yeah. You could even fold in foie gras drippings into this if you want.
Yeah, now you're talking dirty.
Yeah.
All right.
So same thing as the tart flour that we're kind of doing. It's going to be kind of dry at first. You're just going to want to knead your dough. And what you're going to do is it's going to seem slightly dry at first, but you need to let the dough hydrate. And the masa flour actually takes a little bit longer to hydrate than other flours. So at first, it's a really kind of messes up your head a little bit, like you're not doing it right because it's just a completely different thing than you're used to. You're not working with a lot. What you're looking for though is like a Play-Doh consistency. Anybody has kids out there with Play-Doh and all that stuff? So you kind of want that.
Yeah, because right now you're looking at that; it's crumbling apart in your hands.
Yeah,
very much like our tart dough with the melted butter, right? Like, oh, this thing looks unworkable, but that's the thing, especially when you're working with doughs or breads or whatever. I mean, when you do bread, it's just dough with fermentation, which adds another level of complexity. Your dough will talk to you. It sounds crazy, but your dough will talk to you. And if you try and fight your dough, you're going to lose every single time, right? So when it's talking to you, you got to listen.
So get to the point where I kind of work the dough together, and then we'll just put a wet towel over the top and let it sit for about 20 minutes, come back to it. The great thing about masa, though, is you can't overwork it, and you can always add more liquid back to it. So it really helps the process when you go and you're like, oh, man, my balls of masa are too dry.
Yep.
And now you can actually add some stuff and get it to the right consistency.
And the reason why you can't overwork it is because it's corn-based, right? So it doesn't have the gluten and gliadin in it that forms a gluten network. So you can continue to work the dough without the fear of forming a stiff gluten network, which is exactly what we did not want to do by overworking our tart doughs.
Exactly. Cool. So then while our masa is resting, we will whip up a quick, just classic batch of beer batter. Here we're using just American Lager Budweiser.
All right.
So, and again, it's universal. You can use whatever you want. You can use IPAs. You can use porters. You can use stouts. Whatever feels good for you. Yeah, I'm going to fold it into my liquid so I don't overwork my flour.
You guys see a theme forming here, right? So the more you work your flour, the stiffer the structure becomes, which is going to affect your texture. If you're making a baguette, if you're making a sourdough boule, you want that structure. If you want a light, flaky beer batter, you don't want that structure. If you want a light, flaky pie crust or galette dough or tart dough, you don't want that structure. So as you add your ingredients to your liquids, or you add your ingredients and how you mix your ingredients with your flour, it's going to basically dictate how the structure and the texture of your dough is going to form.
Yeah, so again, I'll just add it in batches and slowly just letting my flour dissolve in there and just working really easy not to overwork my flour and mess its gluten up.
Right behind you. Gonna check those tarts, see how they're looking.
And you'd use the same method with, like mixing pancake batters, all that stuff. You're looking for the same outcome, to not have your flour all super tight. As you slowly add your flour in there to your liquid, you'll see it start to form a nice, almost emulsification of the beer and the gluten strands.
Now, for those of you at home, I'm sure you have ovens similar to mine where the temp in the back is a little bit hotter than the temp up front. So I just flip those guys 180. We're using a non-convection oven, so there's not a fan in there blowing around the air. And I just turned the temp up a little bit. We're still feeling out these ovens. So it was at 350. It was cooking a little bit slower than I would have liked. So it's up to 400 now. But that's a nice thing about tart doughs and just kind of using your intuition. You peek in there, you kind of look at how it's browning. Obviously, you don't want it to brown too quickly. But if it's not browning fast enough, you can turn up the heat a little bit. And it's not like it's a steak where you have to do the mix and match. If I got to sear it perfectly and then finish it in the oven, and oh no, I got to turn the oven up and overcook it. You're not going to overcook your pie dough. You can burn it, but as long as you keep an eye on it, when it's a beautiful glazed golden brown, it's ready to go.
So our dough is a little too thick, so I'm just adding beer until I get the right consistency. You're almost going for like a pancake batter consistency. That could have been my fault. I think I weighed the liquid out too short.
Did you ever see there's a documentary done on this guy who did a blog where he was going to, and he was just I think he was an engineer by trade. I could be wrong. But when Grant Achatz came out with his Alinea cookbook, which was super advanced, this guy created a blog where he cooked his way through the entire Alinea cookbook. And he even like create service pieces that you can't buy because only, Grant Achatz had them at Alinea.
Right.
And he was driving himself nuts over this one recipe forever. It's the only recipe in the book that he couldn't get to work. So he gets a hold of Grant, and Grant graciously tells him, "Oh, come on by, and I'll help you do the recipe in the kitchen." And he's in the kitchen with Grant, and Grant looks at it in the book, and he's like, "Oh yeah, the recipe's wrong. Like that ratio's off there." So it happens, and that's why it's important to develop your own intuition. We could triple check recipes,
Yep.
But if you look at the beer batter and it's way too stiff or it's way too loose, trust your intuition. Add a little more flour, add a little more liquid, and adjust it to what you think looks right.
Yep. So I'm gonna throw this in the refrigerator, let it stay cool for us, and then we're gonna blend up a quick batch of Aji Amarillo aioli.
Nice.
Aji Amarillo is a Peruvian chili, very spicy, but it has a lot of like fruity floral notes to it, which I think pair really well with the halibut. We serve it right now at the shore with just to dip some blistered shishitos in and some lime salt.
All right.
So it goes really well.
Let's check it out.
A rubber spat over there.
Yep. There you are, chef.
Thank you.
Also, if you live in the Reno, Tahoe area, Chef Sean here has been nominated. He's in the finals for Best Chef in Reno. So head on over to Reno News and Review to their website and give our boy Chef Sean here a vote. Also, the Shore was nominated for Best Brunch.
Yep.
Best, what else?
Best restaurant in
Best
Reno.
restaurant, okay.
And also best outdoor dining.
All right.
So
a couple of nominations. If you're a fan of the Shore, if you're a fan of the work that Chef Sean does, please head over to renonewsandreview.com and throw him some support.
yeah, it'd be greatly apprecited.
All right, what do you got in the blender right here?
So right now we're just starting off with egg yolks.
Okay.
We're gonna buzz those up till they get kind of opaque and lighter in color. Just kind of. Uh-oh. There we go. I have to mix this by hand.
Why is that?
I'm just wondering if it's getting in enough. No, we're good. Should you put the oil somewhere, Mackenzie?
Oil?
Uh-huh.
Should be in the back counter over there.
I got it.
Yeah, we good. So buzz those egg yolks up a little bit. Oh, there we go.
So measure salt and sugar too.
Yeah. Then we're gonna fold in some Dijon mustard. A little bit of soy sauce. Rice vinegar. Lemon juice. And the Aji Amarillo. This is just ground Aji Amarillo. You could also, if you have fresh ones at home, you kind of toast those up and throw them in here. We just work with the ground stuff. It seems I like it incorporated a lot easier into a lot of dishes. We're just going to buzz that up and kind of emulsify it with the egg yolks. It's about 30 seconds on high. I always forget these new Vitamixes always work differently than the old ones.
Yeah, the new Vitamixes have a weird switch on them. A little bit too fancy for my liking.
Yeah.
Everything's going more and more digital, and I actually prefer analog controls.
Right.
Like even the Innova oven behind us that we use a lot for the kitchens. Everything's digital with buttons. I would much rather just have an analog dial with a digital readout.
Yep, 100%. So then we'll go some fresh garlic cloves, just sliced. Do a little bit of some salt, sugar, and these are just some scallion, pale, white and green parts. That's going to add a nice little pungency to the back end of it. We're going to blend that up on medium to high, break up that garlic, break up the scallions, get it incorporated. And then once it's incorporated, I'll bring it down to low. That way I don't break any of it. And then we'll slowly incorporate the olive oil in with the egg yolk and seasoned mixture as I kind of slowly turn up the speed, so I emulsify my oil to then create your aioli. And the reason I'm folding in low and slow is so the oil has time to incorporate and not get all greasy on there. I'll bring it up to high. Go for about 30 seconds. And then you get a nice, beautiful aioli.
Do you want a 9-pan for that?
Yeah, 9-pan or a little
pint.
Yeah, whatever we got on hand.
I think we might actually be out of pints over here. I'll just grab you a 9.
Yeah, I had a stack earlier. I might have put them somewhere.
There you are.
So again, if you don't like spicy, you can do any really flavors you want. You can just do a typical aioli, X-nay out the Aji Amarillo, and then you just have a really nice, just simple aioli that could work for people.
I think my tarts are almost done. Looking good, looking good. All right.
Nice.
Okay. Let's see. How's that for an overhead shot? Camera 4? Yeah. So you can see we have our 2 tarts done. What's nice about this is you can do this anytime and let these sit at room temperature, fire them back in the oven when you're ready, right at the end of dessert, and you're good to go. Now, this little bit of weeping is natural. If you want to keep that weeping from happening, you can put a little bit of cornstarch, just a small dusting at the bottom. But I find that a lot of times I like the juices kind of soaking into the crust, and you still have a nice stiff bottom. And we'll refire these in the oven right at the end to heat them back up. But in the meantime, we'll go ahead and let these rest off to the side while Chef Sean finishes his halibut tacos.
We are close. Using this bowl.
Go ahead.
All right, so we're just gonna make a quick pico de gallo. Out of peaches. So all we're pretty much doing here is we are taking out the tomatoes and replacing them with our peaches. So we've got a nice dice that we presented you earlier with the peaches, how we either slice them or dice them for whatever methods we're doing. A little bit of red onion. It's going to add some nice pungency to it. Red onion's a little sweet too. They pair really well with peaches. And then where do I put that salt at?
Right there.
Perfect. And the sugar. Yep. Thank you. So we're just going to do a little bit of sugar. That's going to do is that's going to kind of help macerate the peaches. They're going to kind of release their own juices. Add a little bit of salt. And we're just going to do a nice pinch of cilantro. Get that all mixed up, get it all nice and even. And so what we're going to do here is, so classic flavor structure. We added sugar for some sweetness, the salt. You're going to have a little pungency coming out of your onions. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to balance that sugar out and then balance the sweetness of the peaches out. So we're going to need to add some acid. Typically we do like some fresh squeezed lime juice, which is classic, which I'm still going to do here because I like what limes bring to the party. They got a really good acidic component, but what we're going to add that's really going to develop some more flavor is this is our fermented peach water that we talked about earlier. And this is just the juices that run off the peaches in the bag after it sits in a 2% salt to weight of the peaches.
And how long you let that sit for?
That's going about 5 days. Every 2 days I check it for flavor because everything's a little bit different. If it starts getting a little too funky, I'll pull it. Typically 5 days, that sweet spot. Kind of roll it around the juices, making sure the juices are covering over your peaches. Ziploc bags are really good to use because it keeps it flat. And then
that's at room temperature, right?
Yep, room temperature. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Nice little pop.
Yeah, it's delicious, huh? So we'll just add a little kick of that. And then a knife handy, chef?
I sure do. Gotcha.
Cool. We're just going to add a little bit of lime juice to that. think it needs a pinch of salt.
Yep. That's so good, though.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
For those who haven't played with lactic acid fermentation, you can do all sorts of fun stuff with it, but these juice runoffs are like your secret ingredient. I love doing it with like baby tomatoes, the mushrooms, and the tomatoes themselves. They really give off a great umami flavor because they both contain glutamates, and you use those just like you would vinegar to season something. They're not quite as strong as vinegar, as far as they're not as acidic, but it really just brings this beautiful rounded umami flavor to your dishes that it's hard to put your finger on unless you actually taste it.
Cool. So we let the masa sit for about 20 minutes. What I have here already is some pre-made balls of masa that we rolled out to about 30 grams. It gives you a good, decent size, like 6-inch shell. I think it'd be perfect for the tacos. Okay. So then you can see that, your masa's had time to rest. It's still slightly a little dry. It could be, there's so many variables that go into that. It could be the temperature of the kitchen we're in. It could be, not just having enough. Like I said, I got a little bit of water there, and then I'll just kind of tap it with my hands. Okay. And just roll it till it gets to that Play-Doh consistency. So makes it nice and easy to. That's pretty much that. So, and same thing with the balls. Kind of check them. They're all sitting pretty well, but it's always good to just have a little bit of water next to you. You ever watch like old ladies making their things? They're always tapping water in there and just using it, and it's a thing. So we'll just press a couple of these. This is just a tortilla press, a Colombian tortilla press. Okay. Right here, you can use wax paper, parchment paper, plastic bags. I think the Ziploc bag works best for our approach here. Yep. It's simple. It folds with the tortilla press. It's nice. I just like to give it a little spray just for some support. Ooh. And it's real light. Doesn't even need to be anything crazy. Just a real quick, that's going to help our masa ball not stick. And what you're going to want to do is you want to set it off, set a little bit. A lot of people want to put it in the middle, but you want to let it press, and it'll actually naturally just press out flat. Okay. And then you want your bag to be flat, and I always like to just kind of press it slightly just to get it going. And you're just going to roll it and just go until it's flat. And you just have a nice tortilla. Beautiful. You want them a little rough around the edges, right? It's natural. That one might be like just a slight too rough, but not bad. Again, just take your... We talk what we want, 3? Yeah, I think 3 is good. Cool.
Mackenzie, any questions on the tacos or the tortillas?
Is there any type of substitute for masa flour?
You can make like regular flour tortillas.
Yeah.
But it's obviously it's going to be different texture, different flavor. Mm-hmm.
And then
do you like how that one looks?
Do you ferment peaches at room temperature and covered?
Yeah, so they're done in a plastic bag at room temperature. And so a lot of times what you'll do is, and you can do both ways. The 2% salt is going to keep other bacteria from forming. So it creates an environment in which lactic acid fermentation or lactic acid bacteria can thrive. So you can either cover it with a brine, usually about 5%, or you can dry salt at 2% by weight of the object that you're fermenting. And then you're going to put it into a plastic bag and try and take out as much air as possible. So if you have like a chamber vacuum sealer or just an edge sealer, that works really well, because then what you do is you vacuum seal the fruit that you're fermenting, leave it somewhere at room temperature where you can check on it, and the bag will start to puff. And when the bag's fully puffed up, you actually know that the fermentation process is done. And you pull off the liquid, then you can take the thing that you fermented, use that as your ingredient, dice it up, throw it into salsas. You can dry it, do all sorts of fun stuff.
No more taco questions.
All right, cool.
Cool. So we will get our halibut frying. At the same time, we'll cook our tostadas.
Right behind you.
And then we could probably start getting everything finished for that. I just temped that a while ago. That was at 375 degrees. I'm thinking for the size of tortillas, how they came out, cutting this halibut down slightly is probably going to be our best approach.
Okay.
Just to fit it all in the taco. So I got to weigh out about at 2 ounces. Probably going to want to look at 1 for the size of our tortillas. So I got our batter up to 375 degrees.
The oil.
Yeah, the oil. So I said batter.
Yeah.
Yeah, the oil up to 375. So I want it higher than my cooking temperature because as I drop this halibut in there, it's going to drastically drop my oil temperature. And I want these to fry at 350 to 360. I'm just going to kind of drop all these in there, lightly coat them. Get them all evenly coated together because we're going to just drop them all at the same time so they all cook evenly. I'll kind of let it set, kind of do it slowly, drop it. That gives the beer batter time to set on the bottom part of the fish. So now it'll start to fry and float. And while that's cooking, we'll drop our tortillas down.
And about how hot is that cast iron?
You want it to get up to upwards of like 400 degrees.
Okay.
And the thing you're going to do is with tortillas, you want to sear it lightly on the first side, flip it, let it cook, then flip it again. And it helps the inside of the tortilla cook more evenly.
Okay.
I'll kind of rotate these around a little bit. That way we get a nice even cook on each side. Yeah, as you can already see, they're already browning. But see how they're like sliding around now?
Yep.
That's what you want to see with the tortillas.
Oh, look at that batter. That's set up perfectly.
Oh, it's beautiful.
That's gorgeous.
Nice and crisp. Give it one more quick flip. Probably be pretty good. We'll get our tortillas flipping one more time.
Those are some large and in charge halibut pieces.
Yeah, I know. A little bit bigger than I anticipated. We'll let those rest. Cool. So now I'll just make a quick slaw with some shredded cabbage, a little bit of that Oggi Amarillo aioli. Just a light toss. Kind of form our taco.
And then while Chef Sean's building those tacos, I'm actually going to drop a couple of these basil leaves into the hot oil, and we'll fry these up. We'll dust them in some sugar, and we'll use these as a garnish for our tart. Fire in the hole.
Yeah, a lot of moisture.
Yep. Now, there's also a version of, if you look on my YouTube channel, you just search fried basil, and I show how to fry the basil in a microwave using a plate and some plastic wrap to keep it flat. So it's just another approach that you can do that makes a nice garnish. But these guys will just fry till they're crispy.
Cool. Little base of the cabbage down.
Nice. Those are great. Let's see. Grab the sugar. While the basil leaves are still hot, you want to season them. And the sugar will stick to that hot oil. Spread that guy out a little bit. And you could use fresh basil as well. You can tear it, you can chiffonade it, cut it into thin strips. It's all up to you. Oh, man, those tacos look killer.
I don't even think we need it, but I did have some radishes sliced just in case we wanted some. But this is looking a little big now.
Yeah, this is one of these things when you're, messing around in a kitchen, working on a dish, doing a live stream. If we were to put this on the restaurant menu, we'd probably look at this tester and be like, it's nice to have a big piece of halibut, but we probably need to make the halibut a little bit smaller because of how it fries up, or the tortilla larger and serve two of them. So, just one of those things that you adjust as you go. Is that it?
That's
done?
That's pretty much it.
All right. So let's move over here. Before we bite into those, let's go ahead and finish the tart. Oh, I put it behind me. So I think we're gonna go oval plate here.
Cool.
And then, did you steal my little mixing bowl?
I did. You gave it to me.
All right, it's okay. I got more. All right, and so again, a cream component, just a simple whipped cream on the bottom is fine. But you could also, do like a creme anglaise, which is like your classic, so pastry sauce, any number of sauces, but something cream based, cream and peaches and cream, right? They're one of those just fantastic matches. But since we already had some of Chef Sean's koji yogurt, we're going to go ahead and use that as well, so we can cross utilize our various ingredients. And also too, we'll throw in just the slightest touch of this fermented peach liquid. Okay. Add in a little bit of sugar to bring it sweet, but not cloyingly so. Stir this guy in, and then we still have that peach syrup in the fridge, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
So let's grab out that peach syrup.
I'm going to give it a quick hit on some heat.
Okay. Give this guy a little bit of a taste. Check for ooh, that is so good. Really kind of nice and funky too with that fermented peach liquid. So we'll just take this guy here. We'll throw it on the bottom of this plate. Just kind of spread it out. And then for these tarts, you can see, do we have a shot right here? I guess this guy's kind of getting in the way. What's our overhead shot look like? Okay, we'll kind of condense things down a little bit. So this is the one with the melted butter. This is the one right here with the frozen butter. Okay, so you can see that the texturally they're different. So we'll go ahead and take one of these guys.
Stick a little bit.
Just slightly. Scoop it up. Drop it on the plate there. Now you could do just like a regular ice cream scooper of ice cream. We have some homemade ice cream in the freezer here. I'm going to warm up this spoon real quick on the stove. Or actually, I'll just go ahead and dip it in some hot oil here. And then come back over to our water. How's the texture on this guy? Oh, that's not our water, is it?
Our water right here.
So depending on the texture, yeah, it's going to be a little bit too stiff. You can see we can get a little bit of a pastry quenelle here.
Water.
Go ahead and turn on the flame for me. So in the restaurant, we'll just use a torch, and we'll just kind of blow torch the bottom of this guy to help release it. But here, I'll just move over to the stove. Quick, just a little heat of the spoon on the stove. Come back. So that way, it's more of a elongated pastry quenelle, right? So it kind of fits the presentation a little bit better. Then we have our peach pit syrup here, or gastrique. We'll just drizzle that over the top. Maybe drizzle a little bit around the plate. And of course, I love a good finishing salt for my desserts. Little Malden sea salt for a crunch. Sprinkle that over the top. And then we have our fried basil leaves. Basil and peaches are just one of those magical matches, right? So we'll try not to crumple these guys up too much. So maybe, kind of depends on what you're feeling, but I would say kind of lean it like this so you don't completely hide the pastry quenelle. This is where, if you have fat fingers, tweezers really come in handy. right? Do we have tweezers over here?
I don't have any tweezers in here right now. Do you?
Okay. We have. It's okay, Mackenzie. Don't worry about it.
I got a couple spares down in the office, so
Yep.
we'll load it up.
So when you're plating, it's always nice to plate in odds. So we have 3 right here, but you could just as easily as go through and chiffonade up some basil cut into some thin strips. So there you have it, right? 3 courses to celebrate peaches. Where's our best overhead shot, Mackenzie? What do you say, producer? Right about here? Let's go and move that forward. All right. So peach salad with your corn burrata and koji yogurt, halibut with peach pico de gallo, and a really easy free-form peach tart with a homemade vanilla ice cream and a peach pit simple syrup. But as you can see, what we really wanted to go to is give you some options of how you can use peaches a few different ways. You don't have to use the exact recipes. Obviously, we want to give you some inspiration. Take one component. I mean, you could just take the grilled peaches and work it into a salad or to an appetizer. You could do a grilled peach bruschetta. You could do a peach salsa and just dip some chips in it. So.
Yep.
Point being, peach season is coming to an end. You got probably 2 weeks left if you live on the west coast of the United States. So go out, get some peaches this weekend, and have fun cooking up a storm. We will now take your questions.
All right.
You want to kill that hood for me?
Yeah.
I'll start with the questions relating to the dishes.
Okay. Yep.
And then after that, I'll go to the other ones.
Perfect.
Do you always brine your fish?
Do we all? Yeah, we almost always brine our fish, and that's it's our standard alkaline brine. So 5% salt, 3% sugar, 0.5% baking soda. But the brine itself is we only do it for about 30 to 60 minutes tops, and so it's just long enough to really help hold the albumin in the fish, which helps to keep it moist. But we're not brining it nearly as long as like a land animal like poultry or pork.
All right. And then which chili or chilies perhaps do you pair with peach for spice?
I think like guajillos are a really good one to do. They're a little more sweet. They're not as spicy, so those chilies go well. A really thinly sliced jalapeno or like serrano goes well. We used to do a salad last year where we did blistered shishito peppers with it.
Yep.
And those went really well together. Pretty much anything like kind of a little more mild that's not going to overpower too much, but that the sweetness of the peach can still help balance is going to be good. I would avoid, like ghost peppers or, habaneros would still be all right if you cut the seeds out.
Yeah.
And then what is the proper name for the fermented peach liquid?
Lacto-fermented peach liquid. Water.
Yeah.
It's like a juice. It's the juice. So it's a lacto-fermented peach juice.
What did you use to ferment the yogurt?
I use Shio Koji. So Koji is a natural mold called Aspergillus oryzae that grows on top of just starch in general, most classically rice. So then then you fold that. You take the equal parts Koji, like the natural mold that grows on the starch, and then with water and 5% salt, and you let that sit for 7 days. You stir it each day, and then it creates Shio Koji. So it's almost just like a nice brine water that you would make. But the Koji, cool thing about Koji is it upticks everything like drastically. So you can do a lot of quick fermentations, a lot of charcuterie, 6-month charcuterie like prosciutto you could do in 6 weeks or 2 weeks depending on what you're trying to do with that stuff. So it's really cool.
All right. For general questions now, someone wants advice on making 80% sourdough bread. They're using high protein flour, but can't seem to get a good ear on it. It's either ear or eat.
Yeah, ear. Yeah. So ear is your expansion mark. So the ear itself, the purpose of cutting the ear on the bread is to basically tell the dough where to expand, because if you don't ever make a score, it's going to basically expand where the weakest seam is. There's always going to be a weak seam. That's how you get blowouts. So the expansion, if it's under expanding, it's usually because it's over fermented, and there's not enough energy in the yeast, or enough energy left to kind of blow past the that expansion ear, or your oven's not hot enough. Also, having a stone in your oven that's charged with heat helps, and then having a steam injection or introducing steam early on in the baking process is going to allow the crust to stay soft enough during the first early stages of baking for it to fully expand. So generally speaking, it's because your dough is over fermented. If you're constantly getting blowouts on your seam, even though you're scoring, it's because your dough is under fermented. But also to look to have a stone to kind of supercharge. And another a great point, especially if you live in a humid environment, or just in general, is when I'm working with my sourdoughs, I load them onto a stone, but first I'll put them onto, a basic wooden peel, right? That I put a little bit of flour on, or you can even use like semolina. So you turn it out, and then before I score it, I'll actually let it sit for about 10 minutes, exposed to the air, so no covering, and that will slightly dry out the skin of the bread. And then when you score it, you'll get a cleaner score, but also the skin will give a little bit more resistance for the yeast to push against, which is going to give you a little more of a poof, which will turn that ear over. You got a nice sharp edge.
Cool. And then last question is Vidalia or Walla Walla? I don't know what either of those things are.
Yeah, we don't do vague questions, so all right.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed the peak peach season. We do plan on cutting some of these videos up and dropping them into the stream as well, so you can revisit them without watching the whole live stream. But I want to thank Chef Sean for joining me. It's a pleasure to have him as the first guest on the show. I was telling him, we got other local chefs we're going to bring in. I'm like, man, you got to come on, because it doesn't feel right to have any other chef before you come and hang out with me in the kitchen in the R Lab space. But hopefully this gave you a good sort of understanding of what you could do with some peaches or some stone fruit in general. And get out there, grab some peaches this weekend. Towards the end of the season is always when your produce is going to be the best. It's going to be the most ripe and sweet. But that produce is quickly fleeting the markets. So once peach season is over, in about another month, even though we've had heirloom tomatoes all summer long, they really start to get good like into September. So we're going to be making that transition for September and October. The heirloom tomatoes that we get from the Sacramento Delta, beautiful. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next time.